Good day, everyone. Today, Group 1 will be presenting to you inflation. In this video, you'll be understanding the following topics: inflation and deflation, causes of inflation, effects of inflation, measure and change in price, computation for inflation, and lastly, solution to inflation. And now, here is our presentation.
Before we tackle the first topic, let's have a quick activity. All you have to do is simply guess the two words given on the screen. A few letters are already given as clues to help you, and in order to answer, just unmute your mic and state your name before answering. And now let's review the correct answers. So the two main words we'll be talking about in the first topic is inflation and deflation. And now, let's further understand these two terms. So what is inflation and deflation? Inflation refers to the continued rise in general commodity prices. It becomes the basis of the country's economic situation, and the reason why inflation exists is when goods and services are in high demand, thus creating a drop in the supply of the market. Whatever may be the reason why the supply decreased, consumers are willing to pay more for the items they want and/or need, causing the producers to charge more. The opposite of inflation is deflation, which refers to the continued decline in overall commodity prices. This is simply when there is too much goods available and there is no one to purchase it, causing an inefficient circulation of money. Because of this, producers decrease the price of the product or service until consumers decide to buy it. The balance between these two economic conditions is delicate, and an economy can immediately switch from experiencing inflation to deflation or vice versa. That is why central banks should properly watch the economy's conditions so that they know what they have to do and what not to do.
Alright, now that you know what inflation is, what is the cause of it? Don't worry, because I will answer this question. There are four causes of inflation. The first is called cost-push inflation. This type of inflation is caused by an increase in price of inputs like labor, raw material, and etc. The increased price of the factors of production leads to a decreased supply of these goods. The opposite effect of this is called demand pull inflation, which is the second cause. As I mentioned earlier, demand pull inflation has the opposite effect. Demand pull inflation is asserted to arise when aggregate demand in an economy outpaces aggregate supply. It involves inflation rising as a real gross domestic product rises and unemployment falls. This is commonly described as too much money chasing too few goods. The third cause is import inflation. This is when there are increases in prices of imported fuels, materials, and components increase domestic costs of production and lead to increases in the prices of domestically produced goods. Imported inflation may be set off by foreign price increases or by depreciation of a country's exchange rate. And lastly, structural inflation. This is a type of inflation that occurs because a government pursues an excessively loose monetary policy. That is, if a central bank prints too much money or keeps interest rates too low for too long, the value of each unit of currency drops more than it would simply from increased demand.
Is inflation all that bad? How does it affect savings? I'll break it down for you. Inflation means you need to pay more for the same goods and services. One could also think of inflation as a reduction of the value of money, as consumers are able to purchase less than before. As inflation rises, the value of the peso diminishes more quickly. We categorize the effects by determining both the consumers and the producers. During inflation, the producers and businessmen gain in the short period of time. Usually, the cost of production does not rise as fast as the price of their product, and so there is an artificial margin of profit. As against this, they may also be affected adversely in the long run. If the price level goes on increasing, the total consumption of their product would fall. The reduced consumption will ultimately raise the cost of production per unit and reduce the profits. As price rises, money loses its value and people lose confidence in the money as the value of savings is reduced. Inflation can get out of control. Price increases lead to higher wages as people try to maintain their living standards. Consumers on fixed incomes lose out because the real income falls.
Price is one of the most important bases of any economic activity, especially in a country like the Philippines, based in the market system. All products and services have a price equal to money. The economy measures any price change because it is the basis of whether the value of the currency in the country is stable. The Consumer Price Index, or CPI, refers to measuring the change in the average retail price of a product or service. The first one is Price Index. The price index is the average rate of price in a given year as a percentage of the average rate of price in a base year. The price index is a normalized average of price relative to a given class of goods or services in a given region during a given interval of time. Second one is Purchasing Power of Peso. The true or actual value of purchasing power of peso is also measured by the CPI, a measure of the real value of the peso in a given period relative to a chosen reference period. In acquiring PPP or Purchasing Power of Peso, the formula used is Purchasing Power of Peso or PPP equals 1 over CPI or all items times 100. The third one is the GNP deflator. Implementation is also measured through the GNP deflator or so-called GNP implicit price index. The GNP deflator is an economic metric that accounts for the effects of inflation in the current year's gross national product by converting its output to a level relative to a base period. And the last one is Wholesale Retail Price Index. It also relies on the Wholesale Price Index, which refers to the change in the price of a bulk selling product, and the Retail Price Index, which refers to the change in price of a retail product.
We can get the rate of inflation by reducing the price of the index based on the year of the index price. Divide the result of the index price based on the year, then multiply the results by 100. We can also calculate the inflation by using three methods, which is Method 1. Identify your variables, choose the locations where you want to measure inflation. Second method is working the formula for inflation. Plug your variables into the formula to calculate the inflation. And the third method is adjusting the prices to control for inflation. Create a ratio of current CPI to your target. Let's have an example. Your $1,980 is worth $2.95 in 2015. Let's calculate how much a $5,000 car bought in 1970 will cost you in 2010. For this example, let's use July of 1970 and July of 2010. Follow the following steps. First, calculate the increase by subtracting 39 from 218. 218 minus 39. These have been rounded to the nearest whole number. This results in 179. Second, divide the increase by your original CPI. So, divide 179 divided by 39. This results in 4.59. Third, convert your answer to a percent. To do this, multiply 4.59 times 100. This results in 459 or 459%. Now you know inflation has risen by 459%. Fourth, next, multiply by the dollar amount by the increase of 4.59. Multiply 5,000 times 4.59. This gives you 22,950. Fifth, add the amount to your original number. This will be 5,000 plus 22,950. Performing these calculations gives you 27,950. Here are the formula for the computation for inflation.
Solutions to inflation. How can the problems caused by inflation be avoided? In providing solutions, the role of the government is important for resolving the problems caused by inflation. The government uses fiscal policy and monetary policy to prevent inflation. In the following chapters, we will discuss in more detail the different ways in which the government operates for these policies. Cost push inflation. Inflation due to high cost of developing products and services. As a result, the government will implement tax cuts so that the companies can help increase their production without raising the prices. When it comes to demand pull inflation, rising cost supply is the main reason why this is happening. As a result, the government has a monetary policy for this. To prevent the problem of inflation, the government, under the management of the Central Bank of the Philippines, BSP, reduces the money that circulates in market circulation and reduces spending or is conducted through a so-called tight money policy or so-called DIG. Contractionary monetary policy, raising the discount rate, selling securities such as bonds, and increasing the reserve requirement in banks to reduce the amount of money circulating in circulation. In import inflation, it is important for the government to focus on the local market and cultivate its own products so as not to rely on foreign products. In structural inflation, reconciliation between other bank sectors is important to achieve the so-called equilibrium. When the above-mentioned solutions are implemented by the government, although inflation is inevitable, the serious effects of its aggravation can be remedied. Before we end our presentation, we'd like to ask you a few questions about inflation, so that we know if you fully understood the concept of the topic. Question number 1. What is inflation? Question 2. What is deflation? Question 3. Can you give me the 4 causes of inflation? Question 4. Give me one solution to solve inflation. And the last question, what can you learn from this topic?
And that would be all for this video. We hope you enjoyed our presentation and learned a lot about inflation. Stay safe and thank you for listening.